Don't make a sound. The words barely escaped as a whisper, her palm pressed firmly against his mouth. Your wife is inside right now, waiting for you to walk through that door so she can serve you poisoned scotch. Benjamin's muffled gasp vibrated against her hand as footsteps grew closer, accompanied by a woman's voice calling out in false sweetness, Darling, is that you home already? Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared into the eyes of the man she'd been invisible to for 6 months. The man who'd never bothered to learn her name. The man whose life now depended entirely on whether he would trust the word of a maid who wasn't supposed to talk. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back. Back to the beginning. Back to when Elena Cruz still believed that silence would keep her safe. The alarm buzzed at 4:47 in the morning. 3 minutes before she needed to be awake. 3 minutes gave her time to think, to remember where she was, to steel herself for another day of being no one. The servants' quarters felt smaller each morning. 4 walls painted hospital white that never quite dried from the California dampness creeping through single-pane windows. She pulled on her standard uniform. Crisp white cotton shirt, black slacks, hair twisted into a tight bun that would stay perfect for 14 hours. No jewelry, except the small silver cross her father gave her before everything went wrong. The mirror showed her what the Ashford family saw when they looked her way, which was nothing at all. Remember the rules, Elena. Mrs. Adelaide Thornton's voice echoed in her head from that first day 6 months ago. Staff don't speak unless spoken to. Staff don't comment on family business. Staff don't exist unless needed. Most importantly, staff don't talk about what they see or hear in this house. Ever. The main rule was simple. Don't talk. Elena descended the narrow back staircase that connected the servants' wing to the main house. The Ashford estate sprawled across 3 acres of manicured perfection, a monument to wealth that cost more than most people earned in 10 lifetimes. She knew because she'd looked it up during her lunch break once. $147 million, not counting the art collection or the cars. The kitchen smelled like lemons and bleach. Sarah Chen was already there, loading the industrial dishwasher with yesterday's crystal. Sarah had worked here 2 years and moved like a ghost, never making eye contact with the family. Morning, Elena whispered. Sarah just nodded toward the coffee maker. They'd learned not to waste words on pleasantries. Words were dangerous here. Words could get you fired, blacklisted, sent back to apartments with broken locks and neighbors who sold drugs to teenagers. Miss Thornton entered at precisely 5:15, clipboard in hand. Grey hair pulled back so tight it stretched her features into permanent disapproval. She was 63, had worked for wealthy families her entire life, and treated the help like pieces of furniture that occasionally needed dusting. The master returns today, Mrs. Thornton announced without looking up from her checklist. Flight lands at 2:30. I want this house spotless. Elena, you'll handle the master bedroom and his study. Mrs. Ashford specifically requested fresh linens and flowers. Elena nodded. She'd been cleaning Marcus Ashford's private spaces for months, but had spoken to him exactly 4 times. Each interaction lasted less than 30 seconds. And involved him looking through her while requesting coffee or asking her to move out of his way. And remember, Mrs. Thornton's eyes found Elena's for the first time that morning. The family values their privacy. We see nothing. We hear nothing. We don't talk. What do you think about when your whole job is being invisible? Elena wondered as she climbed the grand staircase toward the master suite. Do you disappear even to yourself? Meanwhile, 30,000 feet above Nevada, Marcus Ashford stared out the window of his private jet, watching clouds pass like cotton balls against an October sky. He'd spent 3 weeks in London finalizing the acquisition of a hotel chain. 3 weeks of 18-hour days and dinners with men who measured success in zeros and commas. He was 42 years old, worth $3.2 billion according to the last Forbes count, and felt emptier returning home than when he'd left. The jet's leather seats cost more than most people's cars, but comfort meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Can't wait to have you home, darling. I've planned something special for tonight. Love you." Marcus read it twice, searching for warmth that wasn't there. Their marriage had become a series of scheduled interactions. Polite conversations over dinner. Separate bedrooms justified by his irregular schedule. When had they stopped touching? When had "I love you" become words you typed instead of felt? He pocketed the phone and returned to his acquisition reports. Numbers didn't lie or disappoint. Revenue streams were predictable. Market projections made sense. Unlike his wife's sudden affection after 3 weeks of barely returning his calls. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Ashford will be landing in Los Angeles in 30 minutes. Current temperature is 74 degrees with clear skies." 30 minutes until he walked back into a house that felt more like a museum than a home. 30 minutes until he resumed being the version of himself that everyone expected. Cold, distant, untouchable. Sometimes he wondered if that version was all that remained. Back at the estate, Elena was changing the sheets in the master bedroom when she heard voices from the hallway. Female voices speaking in urgent whispers that made her freeze with a pillowcase half stuffed. "Has to look accidental," one voice said. Elena recognized it immediately. Catherine Ashford, the Ice Queen with platinum hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. "The timing has to be perfect," came a male voice Elena didn't recognize. Deep, authoritative, definitely not Marcus Ashford. "When he gets home, he'll go straight to his study like always. That's when we..." Their voices faded as they moved toward the main staircase. Elena's hands shook as she finished with the pillowcase. She'd heard something she wasn't supposed to hear. Something about timing and accidents and Marcus Ashford's predictable habits. Don't talk. Don't get involved. Don't even think about what you just heard. But as Elena arranged fresh white roses in the crystal vase on the nightstand, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just overheard something that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11:30. Marcus Ashford's plane would land in 3 hours. Elena tried to focus on her work, but her hands kept trembling as she arranged the flowers. The rules were clear. Staff don't talk about what they see or hear. But what if what you heard was a plan to kill someone? She forced herself to concentrate on the roses, their petals soft as silk between her fingers. You heard nothing. You know nothing. You are nothing. That's what 6 months of invisibility had taught her. How to disappear so completely that even she sometimes forgot she existed. But some things you can't unhear. Some whispers cut through silence like knives. And some rules are meant to be broken when lives hang in the balance. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she finished arranging the roses. The whispered conversation replayed in her mind like a broken record. Accidents, timing, Marcus Ashford's predictable habits. Every instinct screamed at her to leave the master bedroom, to retreat to the kitchen where Mrs. Thornton's watchful eyes would keep her safe in the world of scheduled tasks and silent obedience. But her feet wouldn't move. The voices had come from the direction of the main staircase, which meant Catherine and her mysterious companion had likely gone to the east wing. Elena knew that wing well. She cleaned those rooms every Tuesday. The east wing housed Catherine's private sitting room, the one with the French doors that opened onto the garden terrace. Don't get involved. Don't think about what you heard. Don't talk. Elena forced herself to focus on her remaining tasks. She vacuumed the Persian rug with mechanical precision, dusted the antique furniture, straightened Marcus's desk in the adjoining study. But every sound made her jump. Every creak of the old house felt like footsteps approaching. At 12:30, she descended to the kitchen for her lunch break. Sarah was microwaving leftover soup. Mrs. Thornton had disappeared into her office to review staffing schedules. The kitchen felt different now, charged with an electricity Elena couldn't shake. "You look pale," Sarah whispered, glancing toward Mrs. Thornton's closed office door. "Just tired." Elena lied, unwrapping her peanut butter sandwich. The bread tasted like cardboard in her mouth. Sarah studied her for a moment, then leaned closer. "Sometimes this job gets to you. The things you see, the things you hear. The trick is learning how to forget. What if you can't forget? Then you remember why you need this job more than you need your conscience." The words hit Elena like cold water. Sarah was right. This job paid $2,800 a month more than Elena had ever earned in her life. It came with health insurance, 3 meals a day, and a roof over her head. It meant she could send money to her mother in Phoenix, who cleaned office buildings for minimum wage and lived in a studio apartment with bars on the windows. But what if keeping this job meant watching someone die? At 1 o'clock, Elena returned to the second floor to clean the guest bathrooms. As she passed the east wing, she heard voices again. This time they were coming from behind the partially open door of Catherine's sitting room. Elena knew she should keep walking, knew she should focus on bleach and bathroom tiles and the safety of invisibility. Instead, she found herself setting down her cleaning supplies and moving closer to the door. "The medication will be tasteless in his evening scotch," Catherine was saying, her voice clinical and detached. "Derek, you're certain the dosage will cause the heart attack within 30 minutes. "Completely certain." The male voice belonged to someone comfortable with violence, someone who'd clearly thought through every detail. "The autopsy will show natural causes. Stress-induced cardiac arrest. Very believable for a man his age with his workload." Elena's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. They weren't just planning an accident. They were planning murder. Premeditated, calculated murder. "And our little insurance policy?" Catherine asked. "The maid will be perfect. Elena Cruz. 26 years old. No family connections. Previous employer was a convenience store in Phoenix. She'll be the one to discover the body. And when police search her room, they'll find the empty medication bottle we planted there this morning." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Elena's feet. They knew her name. They knew her background. They had already planted evidence in her room to frame her for Marcus Ashford's murder. "Brilliant," Catherine purred. "A desperate maid steals heart medication from my purse, thinking she can sell it. Instead, she accidentally gives him a lethal dose while serving his evening drink. Tragic mistake. Involuntary manslaughter at worst. She'll get 10 to 15 years. Maybe less, with a good lawyer claiming it was accidental. Perfect. By the time she gets out, if she gets out, no one will remember this case or care about the testimony of a convicted felon." Elena pressed her back against the hallway wall, struggling to breathe. 10 to 15 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. 10 to 15 years because she was nobody. Because she was invisible. Because people like her were disposable. "What time does Marcus usually have his evening scotch?" Derek asked. 7 sharp. He's incredibly predictable. Goes to his study immediately after dinner. Pours 2 fingers of Macallan, 25, and reviews his financial reports for exactly 1 hour before retiring. "And you'll be where?" "At my book club meeting, of course. 20 witnesses who can confirm I was discussing Victorian literature when my poor husband died of natural causes. Elena heard the sound of ice clinking in glasses. They were toasting. They were celebrating the death of a man who wasn't even home yet, celebrating the destruction of a woman they'd never bothered to see as human. Her vision blurred with tears of rage and terror. She thought about her mother working double shifts and calling every Sunday to ask if Elena was eating enough, sleeping enough, safe enough. She thought about the father she'd lost to violence when she was 16. How the police had barely investigated because one more dead Hispanic man in Phoenix wasn't worth their time. Now they planned to make her the scapegoat for another man's death. "The medication is already in place," Catherine asked. "Hidden in your purse, exactly where it should be if someone stole it. The empty bottle is in the maid's room tucked behind her dresser where police will find it during their search. And you're certain she'll be the one to serve his evening drink?" "Absolutely. We checked her schedule with Mrs. Thornton. Elena handles all evening service to his study. She'll deliver the scotch at exactly 7, just like she has every night for the past 6 months. Elena's legs gave out. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the carpet, her back pressed against the cold plaster. 6 months of faithful service. 6 months of being the perfect, invisible employee. And they'd studied her routines like a lab rat. They knew she served Marcus his evening scotch. They knew her schedule, her background, her vulnerabilities. They'd chosen her specifically because she was powerless. Because she was alone. Because no one would believe her word against a billionaire's widow. "What about the Ashford heir issue?" Derek asked. "If he dies before signing the new will?" "That's been handled. I found the new will in his safe last week and destroyed it. According to his current legal documents, I inherit everything. The company, the properties, the investments, all of it. Clever woman. I've been planning this for 2 years, darling. Ever since I realized that boring cold man would never give me what I deserve. He's been too busy building his empire to notice that his wife has been building her own." Elena closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what she'd heard. This wasn't just murder. This was the theft of a business empire worth billions. And she was the expendable pawn they'd used to cover their tracks. The sound of chairs scraping against hardwood made her freeze. They were moving, getting up. The meeting was ending. "Remember," Catherine said, "nothing changes in our behavior today. I'll greet Marcus warmly when he arrives. We'll have dinner together like the loving couple everyone expects to see. And at 7, our little problem solves itself. What about afterward, the investigation?" "I'll be the grieving widow, shocked, devastated, completely cooperative with police. And when they arrest the maid for accidentally poisoning my husband, I'll be too distraught to comment." Footsteps approached the door. Elena scrambled to her feet and grabbed her cleaning supplies, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped the spray bottle. She walked quickly toward the guest bathroom, forcing her legs to move naturally despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. She heard the sitting room door open fully, heard Catherine's heels clicking on the hardwood, heard Derek's deeper footsteps following behind. "Until tonight, darling," Catherine said, her voice now loud enough for any nearby staff to hear. "Enjoy your afternoon. Looking forward to it." Derek replied, playing his part perfectly. Elena ducked into the guest bathroom and closed the door, her whole body trembling. She sat on the edge of the bathtub and buried her face in her hands, trying to make sense of what she'd learned. In 6 hours, Marcus Ashford would walk into his study for his evening scotch. In 6 hours, he would die from poisoned alcohol. And in 6.5 hours, police would find evidence in her room that would destroy her life forever. She had 6 hours to save a man who didn't know she existed. 6 hours to prevent her own imprisonment. 6 hours to decide if she was brave enough to break the most important rule of her employment. Don't talk. Outside the bathroom window, she could hear the distant hum of traffic on Sunset Boulevard. Normal people living normal lives. Unaware that in a mansion in Beverly Hills, 2 people were planning the perfect murder, while a third person sat on a bathroom floor holding the power to stop it all. Elena looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The same face that had been invisible for 6 months looked back at her. But something had changed. Something in her eyes that hadn't been there an hour ago. For the first time since arriving at the Ashford estate, Elena Cruz was seen. Not by the family, not by Mrs. Thornton, not by anyone who mattered, but by herself. And sometimes that's where courage begins. Elena remained frozen on the bathroom floor for 23 minutes, watching the second hand of her watch tick away precious time. Each second brought Marcus Ashford closer to death and brought her closer to a prison cell she didn't deserve. But knowing what to do and finding the courage to do it were 2 different battles. Who would believe you? The voice in her head sounded like every authority figure who'd ever dismissed her. You're nobody. A maid. An immigrant's daughter with a high school education and calloused hands. They are billionaires. Respected. Connected. Who do you think the police will believe? She forced herself to stand to splash cold water on her face to resume the pretense of normal duties. But nothing felt normal anymore. Every task felt like preparing for a funeral. Every clean surface mocked her with its innocence, while poison waited in Catherine's purse just down the hall. At 2:15, Mrs. Thornton appeared in the doorway of the guest bathroom, where Elena was scrubbing grout with mechanical precision. Mr. Ashford's plane has landed, Mrs. Thornton announced. He'll be home within the hour. I need you to prepare fresh coffee for his arrival and ensure his study is perfect. He'll want to review his mail immediately. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. An hour. Marcus Ashford had 1 hour of life remaining before walking into the trap that would destroy them both. Are you feeling ill? Mrs. Thornton's sharp eyes studied Elena's face. You look pale. Just tired, ma'am. Well, shake it off. The master expects perfection, especially after a long business trip. And Elena, Mrs. Thornton's voice dropped to the familiar tone of warning. Remember our rules. Whatever personal problems you might have, they stay out of this house. The family doesn't need to see your troubles. If only you knew, Elena thought, as Mrs. Thornton's heels clicked away down the marble hallway. The family's troubles are about to become everyone's troubles. Elena made her way to the kitchen and began preparing Marcus's arrival coffee with trembling hands. The routine felt surreal. Colombian dark roast, exactly 2 sugars, served in the bone china cup with the Ashford family crest. She'd prepared this same coffee dozens of times, never knowing she was serving a man who would die at 7 tonight. Sarah entered the kitchen carrying a basket of laundry. You still look terrible, she whispered, glancing toward Mrs. Thornton's office. What's wrong? Elena stared at her fellow maid, this woman who'd learned to forget what she saw and heard in order to survive. Could she tell Sarah? Could she trust anyone in this house where silence was survival if you overheard something terrible? Elena whispered back, something that could hurt people. What would you do? Sarah's face went pale. She set down the laundry basket and gripped Elena's arm. You didn't hear anything. You didn't see anything. Whatever it was, you forget it right now. But what if someone's life was in danger? Then you save your own life first. Sarah's voice carried the weight of hard experience. I worked for a family in Boston before this. The husband was beating his teenage daughter. I reported it to child services thinking I was doing the right thing. You know what happened? They fired me, blacklisted me, made it impossible for me to get work anywhere in Massachusetts. The daughter begged the social workers to leave her alone, said I was lying, that I was just a disgruntled employee trying to cause trouble. Elena felt her heart sink. What happened to her, I don't know. But I know what happened to me. 6 months unemployed, evicted from my apartment, sleeping in my car until I finally found work in Florida, cleaning hotel rooms for half the pay. Sarah's grip tightened. That girl chose her family over the truth. You need to choose your survival over whatever you think you know. The kitchen door swung open and Mrs. Thornton appeared with her clipboard. Elena, take Mr. Ashford's coffee to the front entrance. His car just pulled into the driveway. Elena picked up the silver tray with shaking hands. Through the kitchen window, she could see the black Mercedes sedan rolling up the circular driveway. In 60 seconds, she would face the man whose death she could prevent with a single sentence. Just say it, she told herself as she walked toward the front entrance. Tell him his wife is trying to kill him. Tell him about the poison, about the planted evidence, about everything. But Sarah's story echoed in her mind. What if he didn't believe her? What if Catherine and Derek were smart enough to destroy the evidence before police arrived? What if Elena lost everything and Marcus still died because no one took the word of a maid seriously? The front doors were solid oak, 12 feet tall with brass handles that cost more than Elena's annual salary. She positioned herself beside them and waited, heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. The Mercedes stopped in front of the marble steps. The driver, a professional chauffeur named Robert, whom Elena had seen but never spoken to, got out and opened the rear door. Marcus Ashford emerged looking exactly like what he was. A man who owned the world but found no joy in it. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his black hair silver at the temples, his expression distant and tired. At 42, he carried himself with the unconscious authority of someone who'd never been told no, never been ignored, never been invisible. He climbed the front steps without acknowledging Robert, without noticing the perfectly maintained gardens, without seeing anything except the next task on his mental checklist. This was a man who moved through life in a bubble of wealth and isolation, protected from the real world by money and staff, and the assumption that everyone around him existed solely to serve his needs. The front doors opened and Marcus Ashford stepped into his foyer for what could be the last time. "Welcome home, sir," Elena said, offering the coffee tray with hands she willed to stop shaking. Marcus glanced at her for perhaps 2 seconds. No recognition flickered in his dark eyes. She was furniture to him, a function rather than a person. He took the coffee cup without saying thank you, without acknowledging her existence beyond the service she provided. "Has my wife returned from her errands?" he asked, directing the question to the air rather than to Elena specifically. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Ashford is in the east wing." He nodded and walked toward his study, coffee cup in hand, already pulling out his phone to check messages. Elena watched him go. This man who would be dead in 4.5 hours unless she found the courage to break every rule that kept her employed. Say something. Her conscience screamed, "Say anything." But her voice remained locked in her throat. Marcus disappeared into his study and closed the door. Elena stood alone in the foyer, empty silver tray in her hands, knowing she'd just let the only person who could save both their lives walk away. At 3:30, Catherine Ashford made her entrance. She descended the main staircase like a queen, granting audiences to peasants. Platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant twist, wearing a cream-colored silk dress that probably cost more than Elena earned in 3 months. Diamond earrings caught the afternoon light, streaming through the windows, casting tiny rainbows across her perfect makeup. Elena. Catherine said, her voice honey with an undertone of ice. I trust everything is prepared for my husband's return? Yes, ma'am. Mr. Ashford is in his study reviewing his correspondence. Perfect. Catherine's smile never reached her eyes. I'll be dining out this evening with my book club, so please ensure my husband has everything he needs for a quiet evening at home. You know how he values his routine. The casual cruelty of it stole Elena's breath. Catherine was discussing her husband's final meal as if planning a dinner party. She was looking directly at the woman she intended to frame for murder and speaking about routines she planned to use as weapons. Of course, ma'am. Will you be requiring anything before you leave? Actually, yes. Catherine moved closer, close enough that Elena could smell her expensive perfume and see the cold calculation in her blue eyes. I seem to have misplaced some medication from my purse. Heart pills that belonged to my late mother. They're quite strong, and I'm concerned about liability if someone were to accidentally ingest them. Elena's blood turned to ice water. Catherine was laying the groundwork for the story she'd tell police. The concerned wife worried about missing medication. The tragic accident that no one could have prevented. I haven't seen any medication, ma'am. I'm sure you haven't. Catherine's smile grew sharper. But if you do happen to find them, please bring them to me immediately. Such medications can be quite dangerous in the wrong hands. The threat hung in the air between them like smoke. Catherine knew that Elena knew. She was daring her to speak up, confident that a maid's word would never be believed over a billionaire's widow. I'll keep an eye out, ma'am. I'm sure you will. Catherine turned and walked toward the east wing, her heels clicking a countdown on the marble floor. Elena stood frozen in the foyer, understanding with crystal clarity that she'd just been warned. Catherine had looked her in the eye and told her exactly what was going to happen. The missing medication, the dangerous accident, the liability of the wrong person having access to something deadly. It was psychological warfare designed to keep Elena silent through fear and hopelessness. At 4:15, Elena returned to the servants' quarters and sat on her narrow bed, staring at the wall, where somewhere behind her dresser, an empty medication bottle waited to destroy her life. The evidence was already in place. The story was already written. All that remained was for the clock to strike 7 and for Marcus Ashford to take his final drink. She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? That she'd overheard a conversation about medication and timing, that a billionaire's wife was planning to kill her husband without evidence, without proof. It would be her word against theirs. She thought about running, but where could she go? Her name was already connected to this crime. If she disappeared before Marcus died, it would only make her look more guilty. She thought about confronting Marcus directly, but he'd barely acknowledged her existence in 6 months. Why would he believe the desperate claims of a maid he'd never bothered to see as human? Every option led to the same conclusion. She was trapped. The afternoon sun slanted through her small window, marking time like a sundial counting down to disaster. In 3 hours, Marcus Ashford would die. In 3 hours and 30 minutes, police would find the evidence that would send her to prison for a crime she didn't commit. Unless she found the courage to break the one rule that had kept her safe. Don't talk. But sometimes silence isn't safety. Sometimes silence is complicity. And sometimes the only way to save yourself is to save someone else first. The fire alarm suddenly pierced the evening air like a banshee's wail. The sound sent Elena shooting to her feet, heart already racing from an afternoon of terror. Through her small window, she could see no smoke, no flames, nothing to indicate an actual emergency. But the alarm continued its relentless shrieking, echoing through every room of the Ashford mansion. Mrs. Thornton's voice boomed over the house's intercom system. "All staff to the main foyer immediately. This is not a drill. All staff to the main foyer." Elena joined the stream of confused employees converging on the front entrance. Sarah was there along with Carlos the groundskeeper, Robert the chauffeur, and the 3 part-time housekeepers who handled the lower floors. Mrs. Thornton stood at the center of the marble foyer, clipboard in hand, conducting roll call like a general marshalling troops. The security system detected smoke in the east wing. Mrs. Thornton announced over the continuing alarm. "The fire department has been notified, but as a precaution, no one is to enter that section of the house until the all clear is given." Elena's blood ran cold. The east wing, Catherine's sitting room, the place where the murder plot had been finalized just hours earlier. "Where is Mrs. Ashford?" Mrs. Thornton continued scanning her list. "She left 20 minutes ago," Robert replied. "Book club meeting in Malibu. Won't be back until late." "And Mr. Ashford, still in his study." Elena answered automatically, then felt the weight of every eye turning toward her. "I saw him there when I delivered his afternoon tea." Mrs. Thornton made a note on her clipboard. "The study is in the main wing away from the detected smoke. He should be safe, but we need to evacuate him as a precaution." She looked directly at Elena. "You know his routine better than anyone. Go inform Mr. Ashford of the situation and escort him to the front lawn. Everyone else remain here until the fire department arrives." Elena's mouth went dry. She was being sent alone to face the man whose life hung in the balance. The man she'd failed to warn twice already. But now there was no choice. No way to avoid the confrontation that had been building all afternoon. She climbed the main staircase with legs that felt like lead, the fire alarm shrieking, masking the sound of her footsteps. The hallway outside Marcus's study felt different now, charged with the electricity of impending disaster. In 90 minutes, this man would be dead unless she found the courage to break 6 months of enforced silence. Elena knocked on the heavy oak door. "Come in," Marcus's voice called from within. She entered to find him exactly where she'd expected. Behind his massive desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, surrounded by financial reports and legal documents. The afternoon light streaming through the windows caught the silver in his hair, making him look older than his 42 years. More vulnerable. "Sir, there's been a fire alarm," Elena said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Mrs. Thornton has requested that you evacuate to the front lawn as a precaution." Marcus looked up from his papers with mild annoyance. "A fire alarm. I haven't heard anything." As if summoned by his words, the alarm shriek intensified, echoing through the study's high ceilings. Marcus winced and set down his reading glasses. The security system detected smoke in the east wing. Elena continued, "The fire department is on their way." "The east wing." Marcus frowned. "That's where Catherine keeps her sitting room." "Yes, sir." He stood slowly gathering his most important documents into a leather portfolio. "Well, I suppose we should take this seriously. These old houses and their electrical systems." He moved around the desk, bringing him within 3 feet of Elena for the first time in their 6 months of shared existence. This close, she could see the exhaustion in his dark eyes, the fine lines of stress around his mouth. This close, she could smell his cologne and see the way his expensive shirt couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. This was a man carrying burdens he never shared with anyone, isolated by wealth and position, and the assumption that money could solve every problem, except the problem waiting for him at 7 o'clock. They walked toward the study door together, and Elena felt the weight of opportunity pressing down on her like a physical force. She could speak now. She could tell him everything. The alarm would mask their conversation from any listening ears. They were alone, really alone, for the first time ever. But as they reached the door, Marcus's phone rang. Ashford. He answered, stepping into the hallway while continuing to talk. Yes, I understand there's been some kind of emergency. No, I'm evacuating now. Elena followed him down the hallway, watching him handle the crisis with the calm efficiency of a man accustomed to solving problems. He was talking to his head of security, asking about building protocols and insurance procedures, treating this like just another business situation requiring management. He had no idea that the real emergency had nothing to do with smoke detectors. They descended the main staircase together. Marcus still on his phone, Elena walking slightly behind him like the invisible employee she'd been trained to be. The fire alarm continued its relentless warning, creating a soundtrack of urgency that matched the countdown in Elena's head. 85 minutes until death. The foyer was chaos. Mrs. Thornton was directing staff traffic while speaking rapidly into her own phone. The fire department had arrived. 3 trucks with flashing lights visible through the front windows. Firefighters in full gear were trooping through the front doors carrying equipment and barking instructions. Sir? The fire chief approached Marcus, immediately recognizing authority when he saw it. We need to evacuate the building completely while we investigate the smoke detection. Could take several hours. Several hours. Marcus checked his watch. 5:45. I have important calls scheduled for this evening. I'm afraid the building needs to be clear, sir. Safety protocols. Elena watched Marcus's face cycle through frustration, resignation, and finally acceptance. He was a man accustomed to controlling every aspect of his environment, but even billionaires couldn't argue with fire safety regulations. Very well, Marcus said. I'll work from my car, if necessary. Actually, sir, Mrs. Thornton interjected. Your car is in the main garage, which is also being evacuated. Robert can drive you somewhere safe to wait. Where do you suggest? Mrs. Thornton consulted her clipboard. The pool house is far enough from the main building to be considered safe. It has electricity and phone service. You could work from there until the all clear is given. Marcus nodded. Fine. I'll need someone to bring me my evening meal and coffee. Of course, sir. Elena can handle that once the kitchen is cleared for use. Elena felt a destiny clicking into place like puzzle pieces. The pool house, isolated from the main building, away from Mrs. Thornton's supervision, away from Catherine's watchful eyes when she returned, away from everyone except the man she needed to save. I'll escort Mr. Ashford to the pool house now, Elena heard herself saying, and remain there in case he needs anything. Mrs. Thornton nodded absently, already focused on coordinating with the fire department. Marcus was typing on his phone, managing his evening calls from a distance. Neither of them questioned Elena's initiative, perhaps because she'd never shown any before. The pool house sat 50 yards behind the main mansion, connected by a flagstone path that wound through manicured gardens. It was elegant in its simplicity. A single large room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the pool, furnished with comfortable seating and a small kitchenette. Wealthy people's version of roughing it. Marcus entered and immediately began setting up a makeshift office on the dining table, spreading his documents and connecting his laptop to the Wi-Fi. Elena lingered by the door watching him work, knowing this was their chance, their only chance. Sir? She began, then stopped as her voice cracked. Yes. Marcus didn't look up from his laptop. Would you like me to prepare coffee? Please, and see if you can reach the kitchen to arrange dinner. Something simple. I'll likely be here until late. Elena moved to the kitchenette, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. As she prepared the coffee, she could hear Marcus on the phone with his London office discussing acquisition details and market projections. His voice was confident, authoritative, completely unaware that he was living his final hours. She served the coffee in a simple ceramic mug, not the bone china he was accustomed to. When she set it beside his laptop, he glanced up for just a moment. "Thank you." He paused, clearly trying to remember her name. "Elena, sir. Elena Cruz." "Thank you, Elena." The first time he had ever said her name. The first time he'd acknowledged her as a person rather than a function. Something broke open in Elena's chest at the sound of her own name in his voice. This man who was about to die didn't even know who she was. And somehow that made everything worse. Marcus returned to his phone call, and Elena retreated to the small seating area by the windows. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful and terrible, like watching a countdown painted in sunset colors. She looked at her watch. 6:15. 45 minutes until Marcus would normally return to his study for his evening scotch. 45 minutes until Catherine's plan reached its deadly conclusion. But Catherine thought Marcus was safely in his study, following his predictable routine. She didn't know about the fire alarm, about the evacuation, about the pool house. For the first time since Elena had overheard the murder plot, circumstances were working in their favor. Marcus finished his call and reached for his coffee, taking a long sip while reviewing a contract. Normal everyday actions that seemed precious now, because Elena knew how few of them he had left. Tell him. Her conscience screamed. Tell him now while you can. But her voice remained trapped behind 6 months of training, 6 months of invisibility, 6 months of being told that her thoughts and feelings and knowledge didn't matter. Marcus glanced at his watch. "What time do they typically serve dinner?" 6:30, sir. "Good. I'll want to return to the house by 7. I have my evening routine to maintain." Elena's blood turned to ice. He was planning to return for his 7 o'clock scotch, planning to walk directly into the trap that would kill him. The fire alarm had only delayed the inevitable, unless she found her voice in the next 29 minutes. Unless she finally broke the rule that had defined her existence since arriving at the Ashford estate. Unless she learned that some silences were more dangerous than speaking up. Benjamin returned to his work completely unaware that the woman serving his coffee was the only thing standing between him and death. Completely unaware that his predictable routine had become a weapon pointed at his heart. The pool house felt smaller, suddenly intimate, in a way that terrified and empowered Elena simultaneously. They were alone together, really alone, with no Mrs. Thornton to monitor her behavior, no other staff to witness her breaking protocol. Just a billionaire and a maid trapped together by circumstance with 28 minutes to save both their lives. Elena looked out at the sunset and made her choice. "Mr. Ashford," Elena said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of his laptop. "I need to tell you something." Marcus glanced up, mildly annoyed at the interruption. "If it's about dinner, just have them bring whatever's available. It's not about dinner." Elena stepped closer to his makeshift desk, her heart hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. "It's about your wife." Something in her tone made Marcus stop typing. He leaned back in his chair, studying her face with the focused attention he usually reserved for financial reports. "What about my wife?" The words stuck in Elena's throat like broken glass. 6 months of silence warring against the desperate need to save his life. She looked at his face, really looked at it, and saw something she'd never noticed before. Loneliness. Deep loneliness that all the money in the world couldn't fill. "She's planning to kill you tonight." The words tumbled out like water through a broken dam. "At 7 o'clock, when you have your evening scotch, she's going to poison it." Marcus's expression didn't change for 5 full seconds. Then he laughed a short, sharp sound without humor. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" "Your wife and a man named Derek Harrison are planning to murder you." Elena gained momentum now that she'd started. "I overheard them this afternoon. They have heart medication, something strong that will cause a heart attack. They're going to put it in your scotch and make it look like natural causes." Marcus stood slowly, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Elena, is it? That's a very serious accusation you're making about my wife." "I know how it sounds. I know you have no reason to believe me." Elena's voice was steady, now strengthened by truth. "But they've already planted evidence in my room to frame me for it. An empty medication bottle that will make it look like I stole the pills and accidentally gave you too much. Frame you." Marcus's voice was sharp, now focused. "Why would they frame you?" "Because I'm nobody." Elena felt 6 months of invisibility bleeding through her words. "Because I'm disposable. Because who would believe a maid over a billionaire's widow? They know my schedule. They know I serve your evening scotch. They know I have no family connections, no money for lawyers. I'm the perfect scapegoat." Marcus walked to the window, staring out at the pool where the setting sun painted the water gold and crimson. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clasped behind his back, in the pose Elena had seen him take when closing difficult business deals. "This is impossible," he said finally. "Catherine and I may have our problems, but murder, that's insane. Is it?" Elena moved closer, desperation making her bold. "When's the last time she told you she loved you and meant it? When's the last time you had a real conversation? When's the last time she seemed happy to see you come home?" Marcus's silence stretched long enough to answer the question. "They're not doing this for passion," Elena continued. "They're doing it for money. Your wife mentioned a will. Something about inheriting everything if you die before signing a new one." Marcus turned sharply. "What did she say about a will? That she found your new will and destroyed it? That according to your current legal documents, she inherits your entire estate?" The color drained from Marcus's face. "My new will was locked in my private safe. The combination is known only to me and my attorney. Maybe your attorney isn't as trustworthy as you thought. Or maybe your wife is more resourceful than you realized." Marcus walked back to the table and sat down heavily, his head in his hands. The new will would have changed everything. Most of my estate was going to charity, with Catherine receiving only a modest allowance. She would have gone from inheriting billions to receiving a few million. He paused, the businessman's mind calculating probabilities. That's motive for murder. But poison a conspiracy. This sounds like something out of a movie. Marcus looked up at Elena with eyes that wanted to disbelieve but couldn't quite manage it. "Why are you telling me this? Why risk your job, your reputation, everything?" Elena thought about lying, about giving him a noble reason that would make her sound heroic. Instead, she told him the truth. "Because when I was 16, someone killed my father and nobody believed it was murder. Because he was just another poor Hispanic man in Phoenix. The police called it gang violence. Case closed. No investigation needed. But I knew the truth." Her voice broke, 10 years of grief spilling out. "My father was trying to organize the workers at the warehouse where he worked, fighting for better conditions, better pay. The owner didn't like that, so he hired someone to make the problem disappear." Marcus's expression softened, the businessman mask slipping to reveal the human underneath. "I'm sorry about your father, Elena. That should never have happened. It happened because people like my father don't matter to people like..." Elena stopped, realizing what she was about to say. "People like me?" Marcus finished quietly. "You're right. I've spent my entire adult life thinking that money and position and power were the only things that mattered. I've treated my employees like furniture, my wife like a business partner, and myself like a machine that only needed to produce profit. He stood and walked to the kitchenette, pouring himself a glass of water with hands that trembled slightly. Do you want to know the truth about my marriage? Catherine and I haven't shared a bedroom in 2 years. We haven't had a real conversation in longer than that. I knew she was having an affair. I just didn't care enough to confront her about it. Elena felt something shift in the space between them. A crack in the wall that had separated employer from employee, wealthy from poor, seen from invisible. I thought if I just kept working, kept building the company, kept accumulating more wealth, eventually I'd feel something. Satisfaction maybe. Happiness. But all I felt was emptiness. Marcus's laugh was bitter. And now you're telling me that the woman I thought was just indifferent to me actually wants me dead. I heard them talking about it for 20 minutes. Elena described the conversation, every detail, the timing, the method, the cover story. They've been planning this for 2 years. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the information like the businessman he was. When he spoke again, his voice was steady and focused. If what you're saying is true, then we have a problem. It's 25 minutes until 7. If I don't return to the house for my evening routine, Catherine will know something's wrong. She'll either postpone the plan or accelerate it, or find another way to kill you. Exactly. So, we need to be smart about this. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Wait. Elena grabbed his wrist before he could dial, feeling the electric shock of touching him for the first time. What if they don't believe us? What if Catherine and Derek have already removed the evidence? What if they turn this around and make me look like a crazy employee trying to destroy your marriage? Marcus looked down at her hand on his wrist, then up at her face. For the first time in 6 months, he was really seeing her. Not as a maid, not as hired help, but as a person. A woman with dark eyes and calloused hands and courage that had just saved his life. Then what do you suggest? We get proof. We catch them in the act. Elena released his wrist but didn't step back. That's dangerous. Living is dangerous. If we call the police now, it's your word and mine against theirs. But if we can record them confessing or catch them with the poison, then we have something concrete. Marcus nodded slowly. My study has a security camera. If they're planning to set up the poisoned scotch there, we might be able to record it. Can you access the camera feed remotely? Yes, through my phone. Marcus was already pulling up an app. I can see the entire study from here. They crowded together over his phone screen, watching the live feed from his study. The room was empty, exactly as they'd left it during the evacuation. Marcus's desk, his chair, the small bar cart where he kept his evening scotch. There. Elena pointed to the bar cart. That's where you always pour your drink, every night for the past 5 years. Macallan, 25, 2 fingers, no ice. And Catherine knows this routine. She's commented on it before. Called it obsessive. Marcus's voice was grim. I thought she was teasing. Now I realize she was taking notes. As they watched, the study door opened on the phone screen. Catherine entered, followed by a tall man in a dark suit that Elena recognized as the voice from this afternoon. Derek Harrison. There they are, Elena whispered. Marcus leaned closer to the screen, his shoulder pressing against Elena's. She could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of his body, hear the change in his breathing as he watched his wife prepare to kill him. On the phone screen, Catherine was speaking to Derek while gesturing toward the bar cart. Derek pulled a small vial from his jacket pocket. Something clear and deadly that would stop Marcus's heart within 30 minutes. Can you record this? Elena asked. Already am. Marcus's voice was tight with controlled fury. I'm getting everything. They watched as Derek carefully emptied the vial into the bottle of Macallan, swirling it gently to mix the poison with the expensive scotch. Catherine checked her watch and said something that made Derek nod. "Now we have proof," Marcus said quietly. But Elena was thinking ahead, thinking like someone who'd grown up watching powerful people escape consequences. Proof of what? Putting something in a bottle. They could claim it was vitamins or medicine or anything. We need them to confess on camera. How do we get them to do that? Elena looked at the man whose life she'd just saved, this billionaire who'd finally learned to see her as human and realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing a crisis alone. "We give them exactly what they want," she said. "We let them think their plan worked." Marcus stared at Elena with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "You want to fake my death? I want to give them enough rope to hang themselves." Elena's mind was racing, pieces of a plan clicking together like clockwork. "They need to believe you're dead so they'll feel safe enough to celebrate. That's when people tell the truth, when they think they've won. And how exactly do we convince them I'm dead without actually killing me?" Elena moved to the pool house's large windows, studying the layout of the grounds. The main house was ablaze with lights from the fire department's investigation, but the pool area remained dark and secluded, perfect for what she had in mind. "The pool," she said. "It's deep enough, isolated enough. We stage a drowning." Marcus joined her at the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass beside hers. "You're talking about an incredibly dangerous deception. If this goes wrong, if we do nothing, you die tonight anyway." Elena turned to face him, struck again by how different he looked when he wasn't hiding behind wealth and distance. Without his usual armor of authority, Marcus Ashford was just a man who'd been invisible in his own life, as lost and alone as she was. "At least, this way we control the outcome." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his businessman's mind calculating risks and probabilities. "Assuming we could pull off a convincing drowning, how do we record their confession? They're not going to discuss murder while standing over my supposedly dead body. They will if they think they're alone. If they believe I'm in custody, if they think they've fooled everyone, they'll let their guard down." Elena pulled out her phone, showing him the voice recording app. "I hide this somewhere in the study. Then I discover your body and raise the alarm. While everyone's dealing with the crisis, they'll have a few minutes alone to congratulate themselves on the perfect crime. And you trust that they'll actually confess. I trust that guilty people can't resist gloating when they think they've gotten away with murder." Marcus walked back to the kitchenette and poured himself another glass of water, his hands steadier now that they had a plan. "This is insane. We're talking about staging a crime scene, deceiving police officers, putting you at enormous personal risk. I'm already at enormous personal risk." Elena's voice carried 6 months of suppressed frustration, 6 months of being treated like she didn't matter. "In 20 minutes, if we do nothing, you'll be dead and I'll be arrested for killing you. For once in my life, I want to fight back instead of just surviving." Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a recognition that went deeper than their current crisis. "You've been surviving your whole life, haven't you?" The question caught Elena off guard, too personal for the careful distance she usually maintained. But something about this man, this moment, this pool house where all their usual rules had been suspended, made honesty feel possible. "My mother cleans office buildings for $8 an hour. She works nights so she can send me money during the day. Money I send right back to her because I know she's not eating enough." Elena's voice was quiet but steady. "My father died fighting for workers who made more in a week than my mother makes in a month. We've never owned anything, never had security, never had the luxury of assuming tomorrow would come." Marcus set down his water glass with careful precision. And here I am worth more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. And I've never felt more empty or alone. Money doesn't fix loneliness. No, it doesn't. But it insulates you from consequences. Makes you think you're untouchable until your wife decides to poison your evening scotch. Marcus's laugh was hollow. Do you know what the worst part is? I'm not even surprised. I've been so disconnected from my own life that I didn't notice my wife planning my murder for 2 years. Elena studied his face in the fading light, seeing past the expensive haircut and perfect clothes to the man underneath. When did you stop being happy? I don't remember ever being happy. Content maybe, satisfied with achievements. But happy Marcus shook his head. I built this company from nothing. Turned myself into someone my father would finally respect. Accumulated enough wealth to buy anything I wanted. But I never learned how to want the right things. What would you want if you could have anything? Marcus was quiet for so long that Elena thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Someone to come home to who was genuinely glad to see me. Someone who knew my real name instead of my net worth. Someone who would miss me if I was gone, not just miss my bank account. The vulnerability in his voice made Elena's chest tight. Here was a man who had everything and nothing, who traded connection for control and found himself completely alone. What about you? Marcus asked. What would you want? Elena thought about her standard answer. Stability, security, enough money to take care of her mother. But looking at this man who just asked her opinion as if it mattered, she found herself telling a deeper truth. I want to matter. I want my voice to count for something. I want to walk into a room and have people see me as more than just the help. She paused, then added quietly, I want to feel like I belong somewhere. You belong here. Marcus said the words, surprising them both. Right now, in this moment, you belong here more than I do. You're saving my life. You're risking everything to do what's right. That matters more than any job title or bank balance. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. 6 months of invisibility cracking under the weight of being truly seen. Why are you being kind to me? Because for the first time in years, someone is being honest with me. Marcus stepped closer. And because I'm starting to understand that I've been living like a ghost in my own life. You've been invisible because I chose not to see you. But you've been more alive in the past hour than I've been in years. The fire alarm had finally stopped, leaving the pool house wrapped in peaceful silence. Through the windows, they could see the fire trucks beginning to pack up their equipment. The emergency was ending, which meant their window for action was closing. We should call the police now, Marcus said. Show them the recording. Let them handle it. And watch Catherine and Derek hire the best lawyers money can buy. Watch them claim the recording was doctored, that I'm a disgruntled employee trying to destroy your marriage. Elena shook her head. We need more than just video evidence. We need a confession so clear and detailed that no jury could ignore it. Marcus checked his phone. 6:52. 8 minutes until my scheduled death. Then we need to move now. Elena was already heading for the door. Are you willing to trust me? Marcus looked at this woman who'd been invisible to him for 6 months. This woman who was risking everything to save his life. This woman who'd shown him more genuine care in 1 hour than his wife had in 2 years. Elena, he said, and the way he spoke her name made her turn back. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that you've already saved me. Not just from dying, but from living like I was already dead. The words hit Elena like a physical force. 6 months of careful emotional distance crumbling in an instant. She'd never expected kindness from Marcus Ashford. Never expected to see him as anything more than a cold, distant employer. But here in this pool house, with danger closing in around them, She was discovering that he was as lonely and lost as she was. "We're going to get through this," she said, meaning it. "Both of us. Together. Together." Marcus nodded and stood, transforming back into the decisive businessman who'd built an empire from nothing. But something fundamental had changed. The distance between them had collapsed, replaced by partnership, and something that felt dangerously close to trust. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Elena smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the Ashford estate, it reached her eyes. "I need you to die very convincingly." They spent the next 3 minutes planning the deception with the focused intensity of generals preparing for battle. Elena would hide her phone in the study, then return to discover Marcus's drowned body in the pool. The chaos of emergency responders would give Catherine and Derek the perfect opportunity to discuss their success in private. It was a desperate plan built on hope and determination. But as Elena looked at Marcus, seeing the resolve in his eyes, she realized something had shifted between them. They were no longer employer and employee, billionaire and maid seen and invisible. They were two people who'd found each other in the dark, and they were going to fight for their lives together. "Ready?" Elena asked, hand on the pool house door. "Ready," Marcus replied and meant it. Elena slipped through the shadows toward the main house. Her phone clutched in her sweaty palm like a lifeline. The fire department had declared the building safe, and staff were beginning to filter back inside. Perfect timing for what they needed to do. She entered through the service entrance, avoiding Mrs. Thornton, who was directing the cleanup of fire department equipment in the main foyer. The hallway leading to Marcus's study felt longer than usual, every footstep echoing like gunshots in her ears. The study door was closed. Elena pressed her ear against the heavy oak, listening for voices within. Silence. She turned the handle slowly, grateful that Marcus never locked his office during the day. The room looked exactly as it had on the security camera feed, except now she could see the evidence of Catherine and Derek's visit in person. The bottle of Macallan sat innocently on the bar cart, deadly poison invisible within the amber liquid. Marcus's desk chair was turned slightly, as if someone had sat in it recently. Elena found the perfect hiding spot for her phone behind a leather-bound volume of Shakespeare on the bookshelf positioned, so the microphone would capture any conversation in the room. She started the recording app, her hands shaking as she pressed the red button. "This has to work," she told herself. "This is our only chance." She slipped back out of the study and made her way toward the pool house where Marcus would be preparing for the performance of his life. But as she rounded the corner near the kitchen, she nearly collided with Mrs. Thornton. "Elena." The older woman's voice was sharp with disapproval. "Where have you been? I've been looking everywhere for you." "I was checking on Mr. Ashford in the pool house, ma'am, making sure he had everything he needed during the evacuation." Mrs. Thornton's eyes narrowed. "That's very thoughtful of you. Perhaps too thoughtful. I hope you're not overstepping your boundaries." "No, ma'am. Just doing my job." "Good. Because Mr. Ashford specifically requested that his evening routine proceed as normal. He wants his scotch served in his study at exactly 7 o'clock. Fire alarm or no fire alarm." Elena's blood turned to ice. Marcus hadn't made that request, which meant someone else had. Someone who needed to ensure the poisoned scotch was delivered on schedule. "Did Mr. Ashford call the house directly?" Elena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Ashford relayed the message. "She spoke with him a few minutes ago." Mrs. Thornton checked her watch. "It's 6:58. You need to prepare his drink immediately." The trap was closing faster than Elena had anticipated. Catherine knew Marcus was in the pool house, knew their plan was in motion, and was ensuring that the evening proceeded exactly as scripted. But she had no idea that Elena knew about the poison. Of course, Elena said, "I'll prepare his scotch right away." Mrs. Thornton nodded and bustled away, leaving Elena alone with the devastating realization that their careful plan was about to collapse. She was supposed to be discovering Marcus's drowned body right now, not preparing to serve him poisoned scotch. She pulled out her backup phone and texted Marcus a single word: abort. But when she checked for his response, she found nothing. No reply, no read receipt, no indication that he'd seen her warning. Something's wrong. Elena abandoned all pretense of normal behavior and ran toward the pool house, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sun had set completely, leaving the grounds shrouded in darkness, broken only by landscape lighting and the glow from the main house. She burst through the pool house door and found it empty. Marcus. She called out, but silence answered her. His laptop was still open on the table, documents scattered where he'd left them. His coffee cup sat half empty, steam no longer rising from its surface. Elena checked her watch. 7:01. Too late. We're too late. She ran outside and saw him immediately. Marcus, floating face down in the deep end of the pool, his expensive suit dark against the illuminated water. He wasn't moving. For a terrible moment, Elena thought their fake drowning had become real. But then she noticed the ripples around his body, the subtle movement that suggested controlled breathing rather than death. Marcus was maintaining their deception, waiting for her to discover him and raise the alarm. He hadn't received her text. Didn't know that Catherine had accelerated the timeline. Didn't realize that their plan was already falling apart. Elena was about to call out to him when she heard footsteps on the flagstone path behind her. "Oh my God, Elena, what are you doing out here?" She turned to see Catherine approaching, her face a perfect mask of concern and confusion. She was wearing a black cocktail dress and pearl necklace, dressed for her supposed book club meeting that would provide her alibi. "Mrs. Ashford," Elena said, her mind racing to adjust their plan in real time. "I was looking for Mr. Ashford. Mrs. Thornton said he wanted his evening scotch, but he wasn't in the pool house. His scotch." Catherine's eyes flickered toward the pool where Marcus continued his perfect imitation of a drowning victim. Then her performance began. Oh no, Marcus." Catherine ran toward the pool's edge, her heels clicking on the concrete, her face arranged in exactly the right expression of shock and horror. "Someone help my husband." Elena realized with growing dread that Catherine was about to dive into the pool to rescue her supposedly dead husband. If she touched him, if she discovered he was breathing, if she realized he was faking his death, their entire plan would crumble. "Mrs. Ashford, wait." Elena grabbed Catherine's arm, stopping her just short of the pool's edge. "You can't go in. You could drown too." Catherine shook her off with surprising strength. "Let go of me. That's my husband. I'll get him." Elena kicked off her shoes and dove into the pool before Catherine could stop her. The water was shockingly cold chlorine, stinging her eyes as she swam toward Marcus's motionless form. She grabbed him under the arms and pulled him toward the shallow end, hoping he would understand her desperate improvisation. Marcus's body was limp in her arms, his breathing so shallow it was nearly imperceptible. He was committed to the performance, trusting her to guide them through this unexpected complication. But as Elena dragged him toward the pool steps, she heard Catherine's voice behind her, no longer screaming for help, but speaking in low, urgent tones to someone else. "Yes, it's done. No, not the scotch. There was a complication, but he's dead. The pool, just like we discussed as backup." Elena's blood froze. There had been a backup plan. Catherine and Derek had prepared for multiple scenarios, including one where Marcus drowned in his own pool. And somehow, their fake drowning had triggered the backup narrative. Make sure you destroy the medication. We won't need it now, Catherine continued. And Derek makes certain the maid doesn't become a problem. Elena hauled Marcus onto the pool steps, his body heavy and unresponsive. She could hear more footsteps approaching, could see the glow of flashlights as staff members rushed toward the commotion. Marcus, she called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Can you hear me? But Marcus didn't respond. His eyes remained closed, his breathing too shallow to detect. For a terrifying moment, Elena wondered if their fake drowning had somehow become real. If the stress and cold water had actually caused the very thing they were trying to prevent. Step away from him, Elena. She looked up to see Derek Harrison standing at the pool's edge, his face hard and determined. He was holding something in his right hand, something that caught the pool lights and gleamed silver. A syringe. You've caused enough trouble tonight, Derek said, his voice calm and professional. Mr. Ashford tragically drowned while taking an evening swim, and you unfortunately suffered a fatal accident while trying to save him. Elena understood with crystal clarity that she was about to die. Derek had come prepared for complications, prepared to eliminate witnesses, prepared to turn their fake crime scene into a real one. Elena. Mrs. Thornton's voice called from the main house. What's happening out there? Everything's fine. Catherine called back, her voice carrying perfectly across the water. Just a small accident. We're handling it. Derek stepped closer to the pool, syringe raised. This will look like you hit your head on the concrete, then drowned trying to save your employer. Very tragic. Very believable. Elena looked down at Marcus, still motionless in her arms, and realized their partnership was about to end before it had truly begun. She'd found someone who saw her as human, someone who valued her voice, someone who might have become something more. You made one mistake, Elena said, stalling for time. What's that? You assumed I came out here alone. Derek hesitated, his eyes scanning the darkness around the pool. In that moment of uncertainty, Elena heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Marcus Ashford, taking a deep, sudden breath. He wasn't unconscious. He wasn't dying. He was waiting for the right moment to act. But even with Marcus alive and aware, they were still trapped at the bottom of a pool with a killer standing over them and no way to call for help. Their plan hadn't just failed. It had become the very trap they tried to avoid. Elena squeezed Marcus's hand beneath the water and felt him squeeze back. The pressure seemed to say not yet, not like this. Derek stepped closer to the pool's edge, syringe gleaming in his right hand like a silver fang. This really is unfortunate, Elena. If you just minded your own business, you could have lived through this. Elena's mind raced through impossible calculations. Derek was 6 feet away, positioned perfectly to inject her with whatever lethal substance filled that syringe. Catherine stood behind him, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. In the distance, Elena could hear Mrs. Thornton's voice directing other staff members away from the pool area. They were alone with 2 killers trapped in water that would make escape nearly impossible, with no weapons except the element of surprise, and Marcus, who everyone believed was already dead. What's in the syringe? Elena asked, buying time, while her mind worked frantically. Succinylcholine, Derek replied with clinical detachment. Causes instant paralysis. You'll drown while fully conscious but unable to move. The autopsy will show only drowning as cause of death. You've done this before. I'm very good at solving problems for wealthy clients. Derek's smile was cold and professional. Catherine has been planning this for 2 years. Every contingency, every possible complication, including you. Catherine moved to stand beside Derek, her earlier performance of grief completely abandoned. You should have stayed invisible, Elena. That's what you were hired for. But you just couldn't help yourself. Could you? Elena felt Marcus's body tense slightly in her arms, a barely perceptible shift that told her he was preparing to move. Whatever they were going to do, it had to happen now. You're right, Elena said, looking directly at Catherine. I should have stayed quiet, should have followed the rules, should have let you murder your husband and frame me for it. Should have accepted 15 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. Murder Catherine laughed a sound like breaking crystal. Marcus has been dead for years. I'm just making it official. Is that what you told yourself when you destroyed his new will? When you started sleeping with Derek? When you decided $3 billion was worth more than your husband's life? Catherine's face hardened. You don't know anything about my marriage. Marcus Ashford is a cold, emotionally distant machine who cares more about his quarterly reports than his own wife. I've been a widow in everything but name for years. So you decided to become one for real. I decided to take what I deserve. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to a man who looks through you? Who treats you like an expensive accessory? Who's never once asked what you want or how you feel? The irony hit Elena like a physical blow. Catherine was describing exactly what Marcus had done to every employee in his house, including Elena herself. The difference was that Catherine had chosen wealth and status over love, while Elena had never been given a choice at all. He's changing, Elena said quietly. People can change. No, they can't. Marcus Ashford will always be exactly what he is. A man who values money over human connection. And now he's about to pay the ultimate price for that choice. Derek checked his watch. We need to finish this. The staff won't stay away much longer. He knelt beside the pool syringe raised toward Elena's exposed neck. In approximately 3 seconds, she would be paralyzed and drowning. In 4 seconds, Marcus would be alone with 2 killers who believed he was already dead. Elena made her choice. Instead of pulling away from the syringe, she lunged toward it, grabbing Derek's wrist with both hands and pulling him toward the water. The sudden movement caught him off guard, and he tumbled forward into the pool with a splash that sent waves across the surface. At the same moment, Marcus exploded into motion. He'd been holding his breath and playing dead for nearly 10 minutes, and now he used every ounce of stored energy to surge up from the water like a man reborn. His hands found Derek's throat before the killer could orient himself in the chlorinated chaos. Catherine screamed, her voice cracking with genuine shock for the first time all evening. You're supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint you. Marcus gasped, wrestling with Derek in the waist-deep water. But your plan had some flaws. Derek was strong and experienced, but he was also wearing a suit that was now waterlogged and heavy. The syringe had disappeared somewhere in the pool during his fall, lost among the churning waves and struggling bodies. Marcus found Derek's throat and held on with years of pent-up rage and betrayal fueling his grip. Elena grabbed Derek's shoulders, trying to help Marcus restrain him, but Derek twisted free and drove his elbow into her ribs. Pain exploded through her chest, and she went under for a moment, swallowing chlorinated water that burned her throat. When she surfaced, gasping and coughing, she saw Catherine running toward the pool house. "She's going for a phone," Elena shouted to Marcus. If Catherine called for help first, if she spun this as a home invasion or attack, their evidence would be worthless. She could destroy the hidden recording claim self-defense hire lawyers who would turn Elena into the villain. "Go," Marcus commanded, still grappling with Derek. "Stop her." Elena hauled herself out of the pool, her soaked clothes heavy and clinging her ribs, screaming with pain where Derek's elbow had connected. But she forced herself to move. Water squelched in her shoes with every step as she ran after Catherine. Catherine had reached the pool house and was frantically searching for her purse, probably looking for her phone. Elena burst through the door just as Catherine found what she was looking for. "Put it down," Elena said, breathing hard. Catherine turned a phone in hand, her perfectly styled hair now disheveled, her expensive dress wrinkled. For the first time since Elena had known her, Catherine Ashford looked human, desperate and afraid, and cornered. "You have no idea what you've done," Catherine said, her voice shaking. "Marcus will never forgive you for this. You're just the help. You're nobody. You think he cares about you? I think he's a better man than you gave him credit for." "Is he?" Catherine's smile was vicious. "Then why did he spend 6 months treating you like furniture? Why did he never bother to learn your name until tonight? You think one evening of crisis makes you special to him?" The words hit Elena like physical blows because they contained just enough truth to hurt. Marcus had ignored her existence for 6 months. He had treated her like hired help because that's exactly what she was. Their connection tonight had been forged in desperation and danger. But what would happen when the crisis was over? "Maybe you're right," Elena said quietly. "Maybe he'll go back to being the man he was. Maybe I'll go back to being invisible. But at least we'll both be alive to find out. You don't understand." Catherine's composure cracked completely. "I can't go to prison. I can't lose everything. I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much." "What did you sacrifice?" "Your marriage was already dead. Your husband was already emotionally absent. What exactly did you lose that was worth killing for control?" Catherine screamed. "I lost control. Every day in that house, every minute of my life, I was dependent on his money, his decisions, his approval. Do you know what that's like? Being married to someone who holds all the power." Elena stared at this woman who had everything she'd ever dreamed of: wealth, security, status, a beautiful home, and realized that Catherine's prison had golden bars instead of poverty, but it was prison nonetheless. "You had choices," Elena said. "You could have divorced him. You could have started over. With what a prenup that would have left me with nothing. No job skills, no independent income, no identity outside of being Marcus Ashford's wife." Catherine's laugh was bitter. "You think I wanted to become a murderer? I wanted to survive." For a moment, Elena almost understood, almost felt sorry for this woman who'd been trapped by luxury and desperation. But then she remembered the clinical way Catherine had discussed poisoning her husband, the casual cruelty of framing an innocent person, the 2 years of cold planning. "There's always another choice. You chose murder." Catherine's thumb moved toward her phone screen, ready to dial 911 and begin whatever lies would save her skin. Elena made her second life-changing choice of the evening. She tackled Catherine before she could call. They went down hard on the pool house's tiled floor, the phone skittering away across the room. Catherine was taller and had been raised with every advantage, but Elena had been shaped by necessity and desperation. She fought with the focused fury of someone who'd spent her whole life being underestimated. They rolled across the floor, Catherine clawing at Elena's face, Elena trying to pin her down. Catherine's diamond earrings scraped against the tiles, and her designer dress tore at the shoulder. All the elegance and refinement were gone, leaving only 2 women fighting for their futures. Elena finally managed to get Catherine face down on the floor. Her arm twisted behind her back in a hold she'd learned from watching her father deal with troublemakers at the warehouse. "It's over," Elena gasped, both of them breathing hard. "It's over, Catherine." Through the pool house windows, Elena could see Marcus hauling an unconscious Derek onto the pool deck. He was soaked and exhausted, but alive. They were both alive. Against all odds, against every advantage their enemies had possessed, against the weight of money and power and careful planning, two people who'd been invisible to the world had won. But as Elena looked down at Catherine Ashford, she realized that winning and surviving were two different things. The hardest choice was still ahead. What to do with her victory, and whether the connection she'd found with Marcus could survive outside the crucible of crisis. The pool house door opened, and Marcus stepped inside, water dripping from his expensive suit, his dark hair plastered to his head. "Is everyone okay?" he asked. And for the first time in Elena's memory, his concern felt genuine and personal. "We're alive," Elena replied, still holding Catherine down. "Derek, unconscious but breathing. I called 911. Police and paramedics are on their way." Elena felt Catherine's body go limp beneath her as the fight finally went out of her completely. It was over. They'd won. They'd survived. But as she looked at Marcus still, the billionaire CEO, despite his waterlogged appearance, she wondered if they'd saved each other, only to lose each other when the real world returned. The Beverly Hills Police Department had transformed the Ashford estate into a crime scene. Red and blue lights painted the mansion's white walls in alternating colors while detectives moved through the grounds with cameras and evidence bags. Paramedics were loading an unconscious Derek into an ambulance. Catherine sat in the back of a patrol car, hands cuffed behind her back. Elena sat on the pool house steps, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like disinfectant, watching it all unfold like a dream. Detective Raymond Torres, a weathered man in his 50s who'd clearly seen everything Los Angeles could throw at him, flipped through his notepad with the patience of someone who'd learned that truth emerged slowly, one detail at a time. "Let me see if I have this straight," Torres said, glancing between Elena and Marcus. "Mrs. Ashford and Mr. Harrison planned to poison you with heart medication. When that plan was disrupted by the fire alarm, they switched to a backup plan involving your drowning in the pool." "That's correct," Marcus replied. He'd changed into dry clothes, jeans, and a simple sweater that made him look younger, more approachable. And Elena, Miss Cruz overheard the original murder plot while cleaning the master bedroom. Torres turned to Elena. "You heard them discussing the timing, the method, their plan to frame you for Mr. Ashford's death?" "Yes, sir." Elena's voice was steady, now strengthened by hours of telling the truth to people who actually listened. "I heard them discussing every detail. The 7 o'clock scotch, the heart medication, the planted evidence in my room. Everything." Torres made another note. "We found the recording device you planted in Mr. Ashford's study. 43 minutes of conversation between Mrs. Ashford and Mr. Harrison, including detailed discussion of the murder plan and their confession to destroying Mr. Ashford's new will." Elena felt a wave of relief so strong it made her dizzy. The evidence was real, recorded, undeniable. No expensive lawyers could argue away Catherine's own voice describing how she planned to kill her husband and frame his maid. "Where is Mrs. Ashford now?" Marcus asked. "In custody. She's been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, evidence tampering, and fraud. Mr. Harrison faces similar charges, plus assault with a deadly weapon." Torres closed his notepad. "With the recording and your testimonies, this is one of the strongest cases I've seen in 20 years. A uniformed officer approached and spoke quietly to Torres, who nodded and turned back to Elena and Marcus. "Mrs. Ashford has requested to speak with both of you before she's transported to county jail. You're under no obligation to see her, but she claims she has something important to say." Elena looked at Marcus, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his dark eyes. Part of her never wanted to see Catherine Ashford again. But another part, the part that had spent 6 months watching this woman perform the role of loving wife, needed to understand. "We'll see her," Marcus said quietly. They found Catherine in the back of a police cruiser, her hands cuffed behind her back, her perfect hair falling into disheveled strands around her face. The designer dress she'd worn to establish her alibi was wrinkled and torn from her fight with Elena. Without makeup and styling, she looked older, more fragile, almost human. Torres opened the car door, and Catherine looked up at them with eyes that held no trace of the cold calculation Elena had seen earlier. "Marcus," Catherine said, her voice broken, "I need you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. You planned my murder for 2 years. Marcus replied, his tone carefully neutral. How much further could it have gone? I was desperate, trapped. I felt like I was disappearing in that house, becoming less real every day. Catherine's gaze shifted to Elena. You understand that feeling, don't you? Being invisible. Elena felt an unexpected stab of sympathy, quickly followed by anger. I was invisible because I had no choice. You were invisible because you chose wealth over authenticity. There's a difference. Is there? Catherine's smile was bitter. You think poverty gives you some moral superiority? You think struggle makes you better than me? I think murder makes you worse than almost anyone. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, staring at her cuffed hands. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want you to know that I'm glad you stopped me. Not because I found some last-minute conscience, but because I was about to become someone I couldn't live with. The planning, the lies, the cold calculation. It was eating me alive. Why are you telling us this? Marcos asked. Because in a strange way you too saved me too. Not from prison. I deserve that. But from becoming a monster. Catherine looked directly at Elena. And because I owe you an apology. You were the only honest person in that house, and I tried to destroy you for it. Elena studied Catherine's face, looking for traces of manipulation or performance. But what she saw was exhaustion, and something that might have been genuine regret. I forgive you, Elena said, surprising herself. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying hatred would make me less than I want to be. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Take care of him, she said. Marcus spent so long protecting himself from feeling anything that he's forgotten how to be human. But tonight with you, I saw glimpses of the man I married 10 years ago. Torres closed the car door and the police cruiser pulled away, carrying Catherine Ashford toward a future that would be measured in years rather than luxury. Elena and Marcus stood in the driveway, watching the taillights disappear into the Beverly Hills night. Around them, the crime scene was winding down. Evidence had been collected, statements had been taken, and the truth had finally been given voice. What happens now, Marcus? asked Ares. Hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the distant city lights. Elena was quiet for a long moment. I suppose that depends on what you want to happen. What I want, Marcus turned to face her fully. Elena, you saved my life tonight. You risked everything to do what was right. You fought 2 killers and won. You've proven that you're extraordinary. The only question is whether you believe it. What about the differences between us? The money, the social class, the fact that I was your employee. What about them? Marcus stepped closer. Tonight I learned that none of that matters. What matters is finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and chooses to stay anyway. And you see me. I see a woman who's braver than anyone I've ever met. I see someone who fought for a stranger because it was right. I see someone who made me remember what it feels like to be human. Marcus's voice was soft but certain. I see someone I don't want to lose. Elena felt tears on her cheeks, but for the first time in years they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. I don't want to be your employee anymore. Good, because I'm hoping you'll consider being something much more important. What's that? My partner. In business, in life, in everything. Marcus's smile was tentative but real. I know it's crazy. I know we've only really known each other for a few hours. But those hours showed me more truth than the past 2 years combined. Elena thought about all the reasons this couldn't work, all the obstacles they'd face, all the people who would say a billionaire and a former maid couldn't build something real together. Then she thought about the way Marcus had trusted her completely in the pool, the way he'd fought beside her without question, the way he'd seen her as an equal when it mattered most. Yes, she said simply. Yes to being partners. Yes to taking the risk. Yes to building something real together. She stepped closer to him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Yes to not being invisible anymore. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle and reverent. Are you sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back to the way things were. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. When Marcus kissed her, it was soft and sweet as air and tasted like chlorine and hope. It was the kiss of two people who'd found each other in the dark and chosen light. It was the kiss of survivors who decided to become something more. They broke apart as Detective Torres approached one final time. Sorry to interrupt, he said with a knowing smile. But we're finishing up here. Miss Cruz, you're free to go. Mr. Ashford will need you available for the next few weeks as this case develops, but there shouldn't be any issues. Actually, Marcus said, his arm around Elena's shoulders. We'll both be available. We're partners now. Torres nodded approvingly. Good for you both. Justice works better when good people stick together. As the last police car pulled away, Elena and Marcus walked toward the main house together. The mansion looked different now, less imposing, more like what it could become. A home instead of a museum. A place where love could grow instead of wither. So, what's our first order of business as partners? Elena asked. I was thinking we should start with changing the household rules. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious but his eyes warm with possibility. Beginning with the most important one, which is, from now on, everyone in this house is encouraged to talk. Your voice matters, Elena. Your thoughts matter. You matter. Elena smiled, feeling truly seen for the first time in her life. I like that rule. Good. Marcus pulled her closer. Because we're going to spend the rest of our lives proving that the best conversations happen when two people really listen to each other. As they walked toward their future together, Elena realized that sometimes the most important words aren't the ones you say, but the ones you finally have the courage to speak. And sometimes the person who saves your life is the same person who teaches you how to live it. 6 months later, the girl who had been nobody was now somebody who mattered. The maid who'd been told, "Don't talk," was now someone whose voice carried weight and created change. And the billionaire who'd forgotten how to feel was now a man who woke up every morning grateful for the woman beside him, the work they did together, and the life they'd built from honesty, courage, and the radical act of truly seeing each other. In the end, they'd saved more than just each other's lives. They'd saved each other's souls, and they were just getting started.